A spiritual ego is a tricky kind of ego. Unlike the usual ego, which is often loud and clear, a spiritual ego is sneaky. It hides behind good things like love and light, but it can do a lot of harm without you even realizing it. This kind of ego is hard to spot because it's not as obvious as the regular ego we often talk about. It's like a hidden enemy, pretending to be your friend. It makes you think you've got everything figured out. But in truth, there's still so much more to learn and understand. When you start thinking of yourself as spiritual, a small sense of pride may begin to creep in. It's natural to feel proud of your progress, but that's precisely when the spiritual ego starts to grow. If you're not vigilant, this ego can escalate uncontrollably. Feeding this ego with your spirituality can cause it to expand into something detrimental. You might begin to believe that you are better or more special than others. You might even start looking down on those who haven't experienced the same spiritual awakenings as you have. This path is treacherous, as it can lead to spiritual narcissism, a state where a person becomes mean, ruthless, and judgmental, constantly highlighting the flaws in others while overlooking their own. This kind of ego leads to conflict. Instead of respectfully disagreeing with others, people with a spiritual ego might attack or belittle those who don't share their views. Another issue with a spiritual ego is that it can trap you in a bubble of fake positivity. This mindset makes you feel like everyone else is negative or trying to pull you down, which might not be the reality. It's an illusion that isolates you from genuine connections and understanding. Interestingly, the universe itself seems to respond to a spiritual ego. If someone carries a significant spiritual ego, it appears that the universe prevents them from progressing spiritually. Even if it looks like they're advancing, their inflated ego eventually causes them to regress. Think of the physical ego as our basic sense of self. Now, the spiritual ego is like a version of this ego, but it operates at a higher, more vibrational level. It's like the regular ego, but with a spiritual twist. The spiritual ego can lead you to believe that you're somehow above or beyond what others experience. It can make you feel like everyone else is trapped in a mundane, unaware existence, often referred to as the matrix, and just aren't waking up to the deeper truths of life. You start to see yourself not just as a participant in life, but as a master or teacher, someone who has all the answers. This ego makes you think that you've figured it all out, that you hold the key knowledge or truths that others lack. It gives you a sense of superiority, as if you're the smartest person around, always right, while others are just not getting it. This feeling of superiority is a clear sign of the spiritual ego at work. You can often spot the spiritual ego in action when people openly declare how spiritual, enlightened, or high vibrational they are. It's almost like their ego is doing the talking for them. They're not just sharing their journey, they're boasting about it. However, true spirituality isn't about showing off. It's quite the opposite. A genuinely spiritual person is usually very humble. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. Their spirituality is a personal inner journey. If there's a lack of humility, then the purity of their spirituality is compromised. When your spirituality is influenced by this ego, it loses its essence. It lacks empathy and compassion, crucial elements of true spirituality. It fails to recognize that everyone's journey is unique. True spirituality understands and respects this diversity of experiences and paths. It's important to recognize that ego isn't inherently bad. It's a part of who we are. It helps us make decisions and keeps us from getting into harmful situations. In other words, your ego is like a tool that helps you navigate through life, ensuring your survival and well-being. However, problems arise when the ego takes complete control, metaphorically sitting in the driver's seat of your life. Imagine the ego as an aggressive driver. It goes too fast, makes impulsive decisions, and often cuts off others. Just like an aggressive driver on the road can cause accidents and chaos, an unchecked ego can lead to rash decisions and conflicts in life. The ego, in this dominant position, is like a driver with road rage, constantly fighting and attacking others. It's too assertive, too confident, and unwilling to listen to reason. In such a state, the ego is unfit not just to drive, but also to be a co-pilot. Its aggressive and know-it-all nature can distract and mislead, preventing you from seeing the right path. The ideal driver of your life should be your higher self. This higher self is like a wise, understanding, and respectful driver. It knows the way, understands the journey, and respects other travelers. Unlike the ego, the higher self drives with calmness and clarity, making choices that are good for you and those around you. So what role should the ego play if it's necessary but not fit to lead? The best place for the ego is the back seat. From there, it can still serve its purpose. It can be like a lookout, alerting you to potential dangers or problems. In the back seat, the ego can watch over you without taking over the journey. It can be a helpful assistant rather than a disruptive leader. Understanding the role and nature of the ego in our lives is crucial for personal growth and spiritual development. The idea that the ego isn't something to be eliminated, but rather managed and trained, offers a balanced perspective. Imagine the ego as a wild horse. It's powerful and can be quite unruly if left to its own. However, you don't necessarily need to get rid of the horse. Instead, you tame it and then train it. Training your ego involves teaching it that it doesn't have all the answers. In fact, when compared to your higher self, the ego knows very little. The key is to gain control over your ego. If you don't manage it, it starts managing you, leading you down paths that may not be in your best interest. It's like letting the horse run wherever it wants, which can lead to chaos and confusion. It's perfectly okay to acknowledge your knowledge and abilities. You can appreciate and value yourself, knowing that you have much to offer. However, this self-esteem must be tempered with humility. Being humble means understanding that there's always more to learn. Every interaction, every encounter offers a lesson, but you can only absorb these lessons if you're humble enough to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers. Holding yourself in high regard is different from being prideful. Pride often involves comparing yourself to others and feeling superior. This comparison can lead to looking down on others, which is not a sign of true self-esteem or confidence. True confidence is about knowing your worth without having to diminish the worth of others. Being overly confident can lead to what we might call a swollen ego. This inflated ego becomes a barrier in your life, blocking your ability to see clearly, to connect with others, and to grow. It's like the horse becoming too wild to handle, disrupting everything around it. I truly hope these words have brought a little sparkle to your soul. If you're still here with me, I just want to say a big thank you for listening. If this resonates with you, I'd be so grateful if you could pass it along to someone who might need to hear it too. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Wishing you an absolutely beautiful day ahead.